In a quiet suburb where the days melded seamlessly into each other, Eliza's life was the epitome of serene domesticity. Her home, a beautiful haven of warmth and comfort, stood as a testament to what appeared to be her ideal existence. With a loving husband, Michael, and 2 radiant children, Lily and Max, her life was a canvas painted with broad strokes of happiness and contentment. Eliza, with her gentle demeanor and a smile that rarely faded, was often seen in the early mornings standing by the kitchen window. Her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, she watched as the garden came to life with the playful laughter of her children and the tender care of Michael among the flowers. It was a picture-perfect scene, one that she had always dreamed of. However, beneath this idyllic surface, Eliza battled with a sense of unease that whispered doubts into her heart. These feelings were elusive, like shadows that danced just out of sight, making her question the perfection of her life. She couldn't pinpoint the source of her discontent, but it was a constant hum in the back of her mind, a dissonant note in the symphony of her seemingly perfect world. One crisp morning, as the sun cast a golden hue over the kitchen, Michael joined Eliza by the window. He wrapped his arms around her, a gesture that once brought her immense comfort. "Everything looks so beautiful, doesn't it?" Michael murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Eliza nodded, leaning back into his embrace. "It does," she replied, her voice a soft whisper. But her heart ached with a longing she couldn't explain, her smile a mask that hid her turmoil. "Why do I sense a but in your voice?" Michael asked, a note of concern threading through his words. Eliza shook her head, forcing a brighter smile. "No buts. Just enjoying the moment," she said, not wanting to voice the restlessness that gnawed at her insides. As they stood there, a perfect picture of a happy couple, Eliza couldn't shake off the feeling that something was missing, a gap she couldn't bridge. Despite the laughter of her children and Michael's love, she felt adrift, disconnected from the perfect image she presented to the world. It was during these moments of reflection that Eliza wondered if the life she had built was merely a facade, a beautiful veneer that concealed her true feelings. The harmony of her home, the laughter, and the love, all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together in her heart. Yet, Eliza pushed these thoughts aside, choosing to focus on the joy that her family brought her. She believed that in time, the shadows that lingered in her heart would dissipate, leaving only the light of her seemingly perfect life. But deep down, she knew that ignoring these whispers was like trying to calm a storm that was slowly brewing on the horizon, one that threatened to shatter the perfect facade she had so carefully maintained. The tranquility of Eliza's life was shattered on an afternoon that began like any other. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting a serene light across the kitchen where Eliza found herself sorting through the day's mail. Among the usual assortment of bills and advertisements, a single, unassuming envelope lay at the bottom of the pile. It was the kind of letter one might overlook, yet Eliza felt a chill run down her spine as she picked it up, noting its lack of a return address. She carefully opened the envelope, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the note inside. The handwriting was unmistakably Michael's, the familiar loops and strokes spelling out words that would forever alter the course of her life. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore." The simplicity of the message belied the complexity of the emotions it unleashed within her. Confusion, disbelief, and a burgeoning sense of betrayal coalesced into a maelstrom of pain that threatened to engulf her. Eliza stood frozen, the note clutched in her hand as Michael entered the room. His face, usually open and filled with affection, was now etched with guilt and sorrow. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. "Eliza, Michael began, his voice faltering. "How could you?" Eliza interrupted, her voice a mixture of anger and heartbreak. "How could you leave us like this, Michael? What did we do wrong?" "It's not you or the kids, Eliza. It's me." "I'm so sorry," Michael stammered, struggling to articulate the turmoil that had led him to this point. "Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it," Eliza exclaimed, her grief giving way to fury. "You're abandoning your family, Michael." "For what?" Michael's silence was answer enough. In the days that followed, the cruel truth emerged like a wound that refused to heal. Michael had left her for Julia, her own sister. The betrayal was a double-edged sword, cutting deep into Eliza's heart and severing the bonds of trust and love that she had thought unbreakable. The revelation left Eliza reeling, a ship adrift in a stormy sea. She moved through her home, a specter haunting the rooms filled with memories of a life that now seemed like a distant dream. Her conversations with Michael, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, were now bitter exchanges fraught with accusation and regret. "Why, Michael? Why her?" Eliza demanded during one such confrontation, her voice raw with emotion. "I don't know, Eliza. I wish I had an answer that could make sense of all this," Michael replied, his voice heavy with remorse. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Eliza said, the finality in her voice marking the end of their shared journey. In the wake of Michael's departure, a letter arrived, addressed to Eliza with Michael's handwriting once again. But this time, Eliza's heart was a fortress, impervious to his words. In a fit of rage, she cast the letter into the fireplace, watching as the flames consumed it, the words unread, the message unknown. She vowed then and there to rebuild her life without him, to find strength in the ruins of her shattered world. Eliza's resolve to move forward was a beacon in the darkness, guiding her through the tumultuous days that followed. She focused on her children, her work, and the slow, painful process of healing. Yet, the shadow of Michael's betrayal lingered, a constant reminder of the love and trust that had been so carelessly discarded. As Eliza faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life, she knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. But she also knew that within her resided a strength she had never known, a determination to rise from the ashes of her broken dreams and forge a new path for herself and her children. The world had indeed turned upside down, but Eliza was resolved to stand tall, to face the storm with courage and to emerge from the ordeal with her head held high, her spirit unbroken. The days following Michael's departure were a blur of emotions for Eliza. Each morning she awoke to the stark reality of her new life, a life she had never envisioned for herself and her children. Yet, amidst the chaos of her shattered world, a semblance of routine began to emerge, a testament to Eliza's resilience and her unwavering commitment to her family. It was on a particularly unremarkable Thursday, under the gray expanse of an overcast sky, that the monotony was broken. A knock at the door, firm and insistent, heralded the arrival of an unexpected twist in Eliza's journey. She opened the door to find two men standing before her, their suits sharply contrasting with the subdued atmosphere of the suburb. They introduced themselves as lawyers representing Michael, their expressions somber, their demeanor professional. "We have something for you," from Michael, one of the lawyers, a tall man with a sympathetic gaze, began, extending an envelope towards Eliza. Eliza's first instinct was to refuse, to close the door on this chapter of her life for good. Yet, curiosity and a lingering sense of unresolved business stayed her hand. She took the envelope, its weight surprising her, and invited the lawyers in, her mind racing with questions. As she sat across from them, the envelope unopened between them, Eliza's heart pounded with a mixture of apprehension and anger. "Why now? What does he want?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the turmoil within. The lawyers exchanged a glance before the other, a shorter man with keen eyes, replied, "It's not just what he wants, Mrs. Smith. It's also about what he believes you deserve." Eliza scoffed, her skepticism a thick barrier. "And what could that possibly be? An apology? An explanation? He's a little late for either, don't you think?" The tall lawyer nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. "We can only imagine how difficult this must be for you. However, what we have here might offer some solace, or at the very least, a means to start anew." With trembling hands, Eliza opened the envelope. Inside, she found a check for $750,000 and a small note with the words, "Thank you for saving me." The simplicity of the message, juxtaposed with the amount on the check, left Eliza speechless. Her mind struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the gesture, the implications of the words scrawled in Michael's familiar handwriting. "This has to be some mistake," Eliza whispered, her gaze lifting to meet the lawyer's. "Why would he give me this?" The shorter lawyer leaned forward, his voice gentle. Shortly after leaving, Michael discovered a hidden truth about Julia: she was under investigation for serious financial fraud. By marrying her, he inadvertently protected himself from being implicated. Eliza's mind reeled, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together in a picture far more complex than she had imagined. "So, this is guilt money?" she asked, her voice laced with bitterness. "Not just guilt," the tall lawyer interjected. "It's also gratitude. Michael believes that by leaving, by forcing him to confront his actions and their consequences, you saved him from a far worse fate." The room fell silent as Eliza processed their words. The check in her hands felt like a tangible connection to the life she once shared with Michael, a life that now felt like a distant memory. Yet, it also represented a new beginning, an opportunity to forge a path forward for herself and her children. "Thank you for saving me." The words echoed in Eliza's mind, a cryptic message from a man she thought she knew. As the lawyers departed, leaving her with the check and a myriad of emotions, Eliza realized that this unexpected offer was not just a settlement, it was a bridge to a future she had yet to imagine. In the days that followed, Eliza grappled with the decision of what to do with the money. The possibilities were endless, yet each option carried the weight of her past, a reminder of the pain and betrayal that had led her to this moment. But as she looked into the eyes of her children, she knew that whatever path she chose, it would be one that honored the strength and resilience they had shown, a testament to their ability to rise from the ashes of their shattered world. The unexpected offer had turned Eliza's world upside down once again, but this time, it was with the promise of new beginnings, of hope and healing. As she pondered her next steps, Eliza felt a sense of empowerment, a realization that she was the architect of her own destiny, capable of building a future filled with happiness and fulfillment, despite the scars of her past. In the wake of the lawyer's visit, Eliza found herself in a state of contemplation, the check for $750,000 serving as a constant reminder of her new reality. The initial shock had given way to a complex tapestry of emotions, anger, confusion, but also an undeniable sense of vindication. Michael's unexpected gesture, however motivated by guilt or gratitude, had irrevocably altered the course of her life. As she sat in the quietude of her living room one evening, the events of the past few weeks replayed in her mind like a film. The knock on the door, the heavy envelope, the surreal conversation with Michael's lawyers. Each memory was a piece of the puzzle, leading her to this moment of introspection. The sound of her phone ringing shattered the silence, pulling her back to the present. It was her best friend, Anna, whose unwavering support had been a beacon of light in Eliza's darkest times. "Eliza, how are you holding up?" Anna's voice was filled with concern. Eliza sighed, a weary smile touching her lips. "I'm managing, somehow. Every day brings something new, it seems." "I heard about the settlement," Anna hesitated, the word feeling inadequate for the gravity of the situation. Eliza chuckled dryly. "Yeah, Michael's parting gift. It's a lot to process. Have you decided what you're going to do with it?" Anna asked gently, knowing the complexity of emotions Eliza was grappling with. "That's just it, Anna. I don't know," Eliza confessed, her voice tinged with frustration and uncertainty. "Part of me wants to use it to start fresh, maybe invest in the kids' future, or even start a business. But there's also this part that feels like accepting it would be, I don't know, like letting him off the hook somehow." Anna was silent for a moment, considering her words carefully. "Eliza, you've been given a chance to write a new chapter for yourself and your children. This money, it doesn't erase what he did, but it gives you options, freedom even. Maybe it's not about letting him off the hook, but about not letting his actions define your future." Eliza let Anna's words sink in, the wisdom in them undeniable. The bittersweet vindication she felt was not just about the money, it was about reclaiming her life from the ashes of betrayal. "You're right, Anna. I've been so focused on the past, on the hurt and the anger, that I almost lost sight of the opportunity in front of me. This is my chance to start over, on my own terms," Eliza said, a newfound determination in her voice. The conversation with Anna marked a turning point for Eliza. In the days that followed, she began to envision a future where the pain of the past no longer held sway over her. She researched business opportunities, educational funds for her children, and charities that supported women in situations similar to hers. Each step was a move towards independence, a testament to her resilience. One evening, as she tucked her children into bed, her daughter looked up at her with innocent eyes. "Mommy, are we going to be okay?" Eliza smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes, my love, we're going to be more than okay. We have each other, and that's all we need. And guess what? We're going to start some new adventures together." Her daughter's smile, full of trust and love, was all the confirmation Eliza needed. The check, once a symbol of her anguish, had become a beacon of hope, a means to forge a path filled with possibilities. The bittersweet vindication Eliza felt was not just about financial security, it was about finding the strength within herself to move forward. She had been wronged, deeply so, but she had also been given the tools to rebuild her life. The journey ahead would not be without its challenges, but Eliza knew that she was no longer defined by the actions of others. She was the architect of her own destiny, ready to build a future where the shadows of the past no longer dimmed the brightness of her spirit. The transformation within Eliza was palpable. With each passing day, she grew more determined to not just rebuild her life, but to imbue it with a purpose that transcended her own experiences. The betrayal had shattered her world, but in its wake, she discovered a resilience and a desire to make a difference. One crisp morning, as she sipped her coffee and scrolled through her emails, an idea began to take shape. She had been researching various ways to invest the settlement money wisely, but kept returning to the thought of helping others who had faced similar trials. The concept of starting a nonprofit dedicated to supporting single parents and victims of betrayal slowly morphed from a fleeting thought into a concrete plan. Eliza reached out to Anna, who had always been her sounding board, to share her idea. "Anna, I've been thinking about something," Eliza started, her voice tinged with excitement. "What's on your mind?" Anna replied, instantly picking up on Eliza's enthusiasm. "I want to start a nonprofit. Something that can offer support, financial aid, and counseling to single parents and those who've been through what I went through. I think it's something that could really make a difference," Eliza explained, her idea gaining clarity as she spoke. Anna was silent for a moment, absorbing the significance of Eliza's words. "Eliza, that's incredible. It's ambitious, yes, but if anyone can make it happen, it's you. You've got the passion, the drive, and now the means to really impact people's lives." Encouraged by Anna's support, Eliza began to lay the groundwork for her nonprofit. She met with attorneys to understand the legalities, consulted financial advisors to plan the funding, and reached out to counselors and social workers to form a robust support system for her initiative. As the nonprofit began to take shape, Eliza found herself in a meeting with a potential collaborator, Sarah, a well-respected psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. "Eliza, I've read about your story, and I must say, what you're doing is remarkable. Transforming your pain into a force for good is a powerful journey," Sarah remarked, genuine admiration in her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah. It hasn't been easy, but realizing I could help others in similar situations gave me a new purpose. I believe together, we can offer a sanctuary, a place of healing and hope," Eliza responded, her conviction resonating in the room. Sarah nodded, her commitment evident. "I'm with you, Eliza. Your vision for this nonprofit can change lives. The blend of practical support with emotional healing is exactly what many people desperately need." The partnership between Eliza and Sarah was just the beginning. Over the following months, Eliza's nonprofit, aptly named New Beginnings, began to take flight. Through fundraisers, community outreach, and social media campaigns, New Beginnings quickly gained traction, offering hope and support to those who felt lost in the aftermath of betrayal and abandonment. Eliza's journey from despair to empowerment became a beacon of hope for many. Her story, once marked by pain and betrayal, had transformed into one of resilience, purpose, and compassion. New Beginnings was not just a nonprofit, it was a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome, to find meaning in suffering, and to turn the deepest wounds into sources of strength. As she stood before a group of supporters at a fundraiser, Eliza reflected on the path that had led her here. When I started this journey, I felt alone, betrayed, and without purpose. But today, I stand before you, surrounded by a community of support, driven by a mission to ensure no one has to face their darkest moments alone. New Beginnings is more than an organization, it's a promise that even in our lowest points, there is hope, there is a future, and most importantly, there is a way to rise again. The applause that followed was not just for Eliza's words, but for her courage, her generosity, and her unwavering commitment to making a difference. Eliza had not only found a new purpose, but had ignited a movement, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of new beginnings, no matter the scars of the past. Months had passed since the inception of New Beginnings, and with each day, Eliza found pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. The nonprofit had flourished, touching lives and mending hearts, including her own. The work was demanding, but it brought a sense of fulfillment and peace that Eliza had never known. It was through helping others that she began to heal herself, learning to forgive and to look forward with hope instead of backward with regret. One evening, as she closed her laptop after a long day of planning a community event, her phone rang. It was Claire, a woman Eliza had met through New Beginnings. Claire's story mirrored Eliza's in many ways, and they had formed a bond that went beyond the usual supporter and beneficiary relationship. "Eliza, I just wanted to call and say thank you." Claire's voice was warm and sincere. "Since joining New Beginnings, I've found the strength I didn't know I had. You've not only helped me rebuild my life, but you've also shown me that it's possible to trust and love again." Eliza felt a lump form in her throat. Hearing the impact of her work verbalized so personally was overwhelming. "Claire, hearing you say that means the world to me. You've been an inspiration to many, myself included. We've both come a long way, haven't we?" "We really have," Claire agreed, her voice tinged with emotion. "You've saved me in more ways than you know, Eliza." Their conversation was a poignant reminder of the transformative power of empathy and community. As Eliza hung up the phone, she realized that in her quest to save others, she had inadvertently saved herself. She had found purpose in the pain, strength in the struggle, and ultimately, a sense of peace and forgiveness that had once seemed unattainable. A few days later, Eliza stood before a gathering at the community event, her heart full as she looked out at the faces of those New Beginnings had touched. She began to speak, her voice steady and clear. "Today, as I stand here, I'm reminded of a journey that began with heartache but led to the discovery of an inner strength I never knew I had. Each of you here has played a part in that journey. Together, we've created a community that uplifts, supports, and heals. We've shown that out of despair can come hope, and out of betrayal, trust can be rebuilt." As the crowd listened, moved by her words, Eliza continued, "I started New Beginnings to help others, but along the way, I realized that it was also about saving myself. It was about finding a way to forgive, not for those who wronged me, but for myself. It was about choosing to focus not on the pain of the past, but on the promise of the future." After the event, as the attendees mingled and shared their stories, Eliza felt a sense of accomplishment and belonging. She had indeed saved herself, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it as a part of her story, a story of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. As the evening drew to a close, Eliza shared a quiet moment with Anna, who had been by her side since the beginning. "Anna, look at what we've accomplished. I couldn't have done any of this without you." Anna smiled, squeezing Eliza's hand. "I'm proud of you, Eliza. You've turned your pain into your power. You've not only rebuilt your life, but also become a beacon of hope for so many." Eliza looked around at the community she had helped to build, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and contentment. She had come full circle, from a woman shattered by betrayal to a pillar of strength and compassion for others. Through New Beginnings, Eliza had not only managed to save herself, but had also ignited a spark of hope in the hearts of those around her, proving that even in the darkest of times, there is light to be found, if only one has the courage to seek it. In the serene embrace of Willow Creek, where the gentle whispers of nature blend with the quaint rhythms of small-town life, the tale of two sisters unfolds. Abigail Harrington, the elder, embodies the spirit of simplicity and grace, her life a testament to the virtues of contentment and service. Teaching at the local school, she finds profound joy in the bright eyes of her students as they discover new worlds within the pages of their books and the boundaries of their imagination. Rosalind, the younger, is the mirror opposite, her soul aflame with ambitions that stretch far beyond the lush green boundaries of Willow Creek. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and endless opportunities, calls to her. It promises a life of glamour, wealth, and status, a stark contrast to the humble existence she perceives at home. Their parents, Charles and Elizabeth Harrington, stand as pillars of the community, their wealth matched only by their generosity and kindness. The Harrington estate, a sprawling testament to both history and beauty, serves as a sanctuary not just for the family but for those in need, its gardens a favorite retreat for Elizabeth and Abigail. One crisp autumn day, as the town of Willow Creek began to don its golden hues, the Harrington family found themselves in the company of Mr. Blackwood, the family lawyer, within the warm confines of the estate's study. The air, usually light with the scent of Elizabeth's favorite jasmine tea, carried a weightier presence that day. Abigail, seated gracefully by the fireplace, her hands folded in her lap, glanced towards Mr. Blackwood with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Mr. Blackwood, is there something amiss with the will?" she inquired, her voice soft yet steady. Mr. Blackwood, adjusting his glasses, offered a reassuring smile before he could respond. The shrill tone of a phone pierced the room's somber atmosphere. Abigail excused herself, retrieving her phone from the mahogany desk near the window. "Abigail, darling," came Rosalind's voice, silkily smooth yet tinged with a coldness that sent a shiver down Abigail's spine. "Finally, our filthy parents are dead, and they left all their money to me. I feel so bad for you." Abigail's heart clenched, not just at the words, but at the venom with which they were delivered. "Rosalind," she replied, her voice a calm contrast to the storm brewing within, "they are very much alive and sitting right next to me." A silence, thick and uncomfortable, stretched between them before Rosalind abruptly ended the call. Turning back to her parents and Mr. Blackwood, Abigail saw the mixture of sadness and resolve in their eyes. It was a moment of revelation, not just about the will, but about the depths of Rosalind's ambitions and the distance it had created between her and the values the Harrington family held dear. The discussion that followed was not just about the contents of a document, but about the legacy of a family and the lengths to which they would go to protect it from the corruption of greed. It was clear that the will, and the events surrounding it, would set the stage for a confrontation that would test the bonds of family, challenge the allure of wealth, and perhaps, in the end, offer a chance for redemption and understanding. As the amber sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the study, the Harringtons stood united, not just by blood but by a shared commitment to uphold the dignity of their legacy. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but in their hearts, they knew that the true measure of their wealth was not in the gold that lined their coffers, but in the love and wisdom that had always been the true foundation of the Harrington estate. The Harrington study, with its walls lined with generations of family portraits and shelves burdened with heavy tomes of law and literature, was a place where history whispered secrets. As the amber light of the setting sun filtered through the tall windows, the room took on a solemn air, fitting for the discussion at hand. Mr. Blackwood, the family lawyer, a man whose presence was as commanding as his reputation, cleared his throat, signaling the beginning of a conversation that would unravel the carefully woven fabric of the Harrington family. "As you are all aware," he began, his voice steady, "the drafting of a will is a delicate matter, one that requires not just legal expertise, but a deep understanding of the family's wishes and values." Charles Harrington, the patriarch, nodded, his face etched with lines of wisdom and care. "We have given this much thought, Mr. Blackwood. Our primary concern is to ensure that our legacy is preserved and that our estate continues to serve the greater good, as it has for generations." Elizabeth, his wife, added softly, "We also wish to ensure that our daughters are provided for, but in a way that encourages them to lead meaningful lives. Wealth should be a tool for them, not a chain." Abigail listened, her heart swelling with pride for her parents' vision, but also tightening with concern for her sister, Rosalind. She knew well the seductive pull of wealth and the distance it had created between them. It was then that Abigail's phone rang, shattering the momentary calm. Excusing herself, she answered, only to be greeted by Rosalind's voice, dripping with premature triumph and thinly veiled contempt. "Finally, our filthy parents are dead, and they left all their money to me. I feel so bad for you." Abigail, stunned by the callousness of the words, replied with a composure she hardly felt, "Rosalind, they are very much alive and sitting right next to me." The silence that followed was a chasm, one that spoke volumes of the rift that had grown between the sisters. Rosalind's response, when it finally came, was a hasty retreat into denial and the end of the call. Returning to the study, Abigail relayed the conversation, her voice a mix of sadness and disbelief. Charles and Elizabeth exchanged a look, one that spoke of a deep sorrow for a daughter lost, not to death, but to greed. Mr. Blackwood adjusted his glasses, a gesture that seemed to precede important pronouncements. "This will," he said, tapping the document before him, "is more than a legal instrument. It's a testament to your values and a safeguard for your legacy." Elizabeth reached out, her hand finding Charles's, their fingers intertwining. "We had hoped Rosalind's heart would lead her back to us, to the true essence of our family. It seems we were mistaken." Abigail, feeling a surge of determination, spoke up. "We must confront her, not with anger, but with the truth. She needs to understand the depth of her actions and the path she's chosen." Mr. Blackwood nodded in agreement. "The will, as it stands, entrusts the estate to you, Abigail, with significant contributions to charity. However, given today's revelations, I advise we revisit its terms, to provide for Rosalind in a manner that might encourage reflection and, hopefully, change." The conversation that followed was not just about figures and clauses, but about hope, forgiveness, and the difficult love that sometimes required letting go. As night fell and the study was bathed in the soft glow of lamplight, the Harringtons, united by love and tested by trial, prepared to face the challenges ahead, their legacy not just preserved in ink and paper, but in the strength of their bonds and the courage of their convictions. The evening air was crisp, a herald of the coming winter, as the Harrington family gathered once more in the study, this time to address the fallout of Rosalind's actions. The warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth did little to ease the tension that hung over the room like a thick fog. Charles Harrington, the very embodiment of the family's storied past, was the first to break the silence. "We stand at a crossroads," he began, his voice resonant with the weight of his words. "The path we choose tonight will define not just our legacy, but the very soul of our family." Elizabeth, always the heart to Charles's resolve, added, "We have always sought to instill in our daughters the values that have guided us, compassion, integrity, and the understanding that true wealth lies not in material riches but in the love and respect we share." Abigail, feeling a blend of anticipation and dread, waited for her parents to continue. She knew the revelation of Rosalind's deceit was a moment of truth, one that would either mend or further fray the delicate fabric of their family. Charles turned his gaze to Mr. Blackwood, who had been a silent sentinel up to this point. "Mr. Blackwood, if you would please explain the nature of the test we devised and its unfortunate but revealing outcome." The lawyer nodded, his expression somber. "With your permission," he started, addressing the room, "I will disclose the details of a plan conceived by Charles and Elizabeth, designed to reveal the true character of those who stand to inherit the Harrington legacy." He paused, ensuring he had everyone's attention. A rumor was deliberately spread, suggesting that Charles and Elizabeth had passed away and that the will had been finalized, favoring Rosalind exclusively. This misinformation, we hoped, would bring to light the true intentions and feelings of those involved. Abigail interjected, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "Rosalind's call to me was the result of this test, a test she failed not because she believed our parents dead, but because her first and only thought was of the wealth she believed she'd inherited." The room fell into a heavy silence, the gravity of the situation settling in. It was Elizabeth who finally spoke, her voice a whisper of sadness. "Our hearts grieve not for the loss of wealth, but for the loss of the daughter we once knew." The Rosalind who played in these halls, who laughed and dreamed with us, seems a stranger now. Charles stood, his posture that of a man who, despite the burdens he carried, remained unbroken. It is not our desire to punish Rosalind, but to awaken her to the true value of family and the responsibilities that come with our name. Turning to Abigail, he continued, "You, Abigail, have shown the strength and character befitting a steward of the Harrington legacy. It is our wish that you lead, not just in managing the estate, but in guiding Rosalind back to us, if her heart so allows." Abigail felt the weight of her parents' trust, a mantle she accepted not out of duty, but love. "I will do all I can," she promised, her voice firm. "But Rosalind must also want to find her way back. Our love for her will never wane, but it is her choices that will determine the path ahead." As the fire dwindled to embers, the Harrington family, united in their resolve but divided by fate, faced the future with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Their legacy, built on generations of love and sacrifice, now rested in the hands of two sisters, each charting a course through the turbulent waters of inheritance, identity, and the indelible bonds of family. The Harrington estate had never felt more like a fortress, its grand walls echoing with the tension of the impending confrontation. Rosalind was due to arrive at any moment, and the air was thick with anticipation. Abigail, standing by the window, watched the sun dip below the horizon, its fading light casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Her parents, Charles and Elizabeth, were a study in composed apprehension. Charles paced slowly, hands clasped behind his back, while Elizabeth sat, her hands folded in her lap, the very picture of grace under pressure. The sound of a car pulling up the gravel driveway broke the silence. Abigail's heart skipped a beat. "She's here," she announced, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. As Rosalind entered the room, the contrast between the sisters was striking. Rosalind, draped in the latest city fashion, exuded a misplaced confidence, while Abigail, in her simple yet elegant attire, embodied the understated dignity of the Harrington legacy. Rosalind's eyes darted around, taking in the somber expressions. "What's this about then? If you're trying to scare me, it's working," she quipped, attempting to mask her nervousness with bravado. Charles, taking the lead, addressed her directly. "Rosalind, we are not here to frighten you, but to confront a truth that cannot remain unspoken." Rosalind scoffed, "What truth? That you're finally giving me what I deserve?" Elizabeth's voice was soft, but it carried. "No, my dear. The truth about the test you failed, about the call you made to Abigail, and about the future of our family." Rosalind's facade began to crumble, her initial defiance giving way to confusion. "Test? What are you talking about?" Abigail stepped forward, her resolve clear. "The call you made to me, Rosalind, gloating about our parents' supposed death and your inheritance, it was a test, one you were unaware of. A test of character." The realization hit Rosalind like a physical blow, her confidence evaporating as the gravity of her actions settled in. I don't understand." "A test? But why?" Charles answered, "Because we feared your love for wealth and status had overshadowed your love for this family. We needed to know if our suspicions were true." Tears welled up in Rosalind's eyes as she turned to Elizabeth. "Mother, Elizabeth interrupted, her disappointment evident. "Your actions spoke louder than any words could, Rosalind. You chose greed over family. But even now, we hope you can learn, change." Rosalind, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, finally broke down. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, the weight of her choices crashing down upon her. "I was so caught up in the glamour, the allure of the city. I forgot what truly mattered. Can you ever forgive me?" Abigail, moved by her sister's distress, took a step closer. "Forgiveness is possible, Rosalind, but trust is harder to rebuild. We want to help you find your way back, but you have to want it, too." The room, once charged with tension, now resonated with a fragile hope. The confrontation had laid bare painful truths, but it also opened a path to healing and reconciliation. Charles, his voice firm yet compassionate, laid out the path forward. "We will amend the will once more. You will have a stipend, Rosalind, enough to ensure you are cared for, but not enough to fuel your previous lifestyle. It's an opportunity, not a punishment, an opportunity to rediscover what it means to be a Harrington. Rosalind, still grappling with her emotions, nodded. I understand. Thank you for giving me another chance. I want to be better. As the evening drew to a close, the Harringtons faced an uncertain future, but one brightened by the prospect of redemption and the enduring strength of familial bonds. The confrontation had been painful, yet necessary, a pivotal moment in the journey of a family striving to uphold their legacy while navigating the treacherous waters of wealth, ambition, and the unbreakable ties of kinship. The days following the confrontation were a time of quiet reflection for the Harrington family, particularly for Rosalind. The once bustling estate seemed to embrace a more subdued rhythm, as if nature itself was giving the family space to heal and ponder the path ahead. Rosalind had taken to walking the gardens in the early mornings, when the mist still clung to the petals of the roses, and the world felt fresh and new. It was on one such morning that Abigail found her, seated on a wrought iron bench, her gaze lost in the maze of blooms before her. Mind if I join you? Abigail asked, her voice gentle, not wanting to intrude on her sister's solitude. Rosalind looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. Please, sit. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Rosalind spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think I can really change, Abby? Abigail turned to her, sensing the vulnerability in her sister's question. I believe anyone can change, Rosalind, if they truly want to. It won't be easy, but I know you have the strength to do it. Rosalind nodded, her eyes moist. I've been thinking about the stipend, and what I want to do with it. I don't want to waste this second chance. That's a good start, Abigail encouraged. Have you thought about what you're passionate about? Something that could give you purpose? I've always loved art, but I pursued it in the wrong ways, through extravagant gatherings and expensive pieces. Maybe I could find a way to explore it more, humbly, Rosalind pondered, the idea seeming to take root. Abigail smiled, pleased to see her sister considering a meaningful path. That sounds wonderful. Art can be very fulfilling, and there are many ways to engage with it that don't require wealth. Maybe you could take classes, or even volunteer at a local community center to teach art to children. Rosalind's eyes lit up with a spark that had been missing for too long. Teaching? I hadn't thought of that. It could be rewarding. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the garden, the sisters continued to talk. They discussed practical steps Rosalind could take, from researching art programs to setting a budget that would allow her to pursue her interests without falling back into old habits. The conversation then turned to the stipend, with Abigail explaining how it would be managed. The stipend is set up to support you, not just financially, but as a stepping stone towards independence and responsibility. It's important to see it as part of your journey, not your destination. Rosalind nodded, taking in her sister's words. I see that now. And I'm grateful for it. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a direction, a purpose beyond just more. Their talk stretched on, and by the time they rose from the bench, the initial chill of the morning had given way to a comfortable warmth. They walked back to the house together, their steps light, a symbol of the slowly mending bridge between them. This chapter in the Harrington saga was about more than just financial arrangements. It was a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring hope that family can provide. Rosalind's journey was just beginning, but with the support of her family and a newfound purpose, the path ahead seemed a little less daunting. The stipend, a symbol of both consequence and opportunity, would be the foundation upon which Rosalind could rebuild her life, grounded in the values that had once seemed so distant but now promised a brighter, more meaningful future. Months had passed since the confrontation that had set the stage for Rosalind's redemption and the reaffirmation of the Harringtons' values. The estate, once a silent witness to the family's turmoil, now resonated with a renewed sense of purpose and unity. It was during the annual Willow Creek Community Gala, an event much beloved by the Harringtons for its ability to bring the community together, that the true extent of the family's healing and growth became evident. Abigail, who had been more involved in the community's educational programs, was overseeing the final preparations for the gala. Rosalind, surprisingly to many but most naturally to those who knew of her recent journey, was by her side, offering a helping hand wherever needed. As they arranged the last of the decorations in the grand ballroom, Rosalind turned to Abigail, a reflective look in her eyes. "Do you remember, Abby, how I used to view these events? As mere opportunities to flaunt wealth and status?" Abigail placed a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. "I do. But people change, Rosalind. You've changed. Look at you now, helping to bring joy to others, not for recognition, but for the genuine satisfaction it brings." Rosalind smiled, a true, heartfelt smile. "It's funny how losing everything I thought I wanted led me to find what I truly needed. This feeling of being part of something bigger than myself, it's new to me, but it feels right." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their parents, who looked around the beautifully decorated room with evident pride. "You've both done a wonderful job," their mother said, her voice warm with appreciation. Their father, a man of few words, added, "The legacy of the Harrington family is not in the wealth we've amassed, but in the values we uphold and pass on. Seeing you both work together, for the benefit of our community, reassures me that our legacy is in good hands." The gala was a resounding success, with the community coming together to celebrate not just the changing of seasons but the spirit of unity and generosity that the Harringtons had always championed. As the night wore on, Abigail and Rosalind took a moment to step outside, looking at the stars that twinkled above the Willow Creek estate. "Tonight was perfect, Abby. It's hard to believe how much has changed," Rosalind mused, her gaze still fixed on the heavens. "It's been a journey for all of us," Abigail agreed, "but we've come out stronger for it. Our family's legacy isn't just about preserving the past, it's about building a future that reflects the best of who we are." Rosalind nodded, her thoughts turning inward. "I once thought that legacy was about wealth and the material things we leave behind. But I see now, it's much more than that. It's about the impact we have on others, the love we share, and the difference we make in the world." As they returned to the gala, the sisters walked hand in hand, a symbol of their renewed bond and shared commitment to their family's legacy. The Harrington estate, with its grandeur and history, stood not as a monument to wealth but as a beacon of hope, love, and generosity, a legacy preserved not in gold, but in the actions and hearts of its heirs. The morning light spilled through the gauzy curtains of the Whitaker family home, casting a warm glow on the heirloom-filled living room. But the light did little to soften the atmosphere when Mrs. Whitaker, the formidable matriarch, made her grand entrance. Her footsteps were a metronome of authority, each click on the hardwood floor a reminder of her presence. I remember that morning vividly, the tension was like a thick fog in the room. I had been married to Alex for just over a year, but the house still felt like foreign territory, with Mrs. Whitaker as the unchallenged ruler. "Tradition, Ella," she would say, her voice resonating with a timbre that seemed to echo off the walls, "is what keeps a family strong. It's what has upheld the Whitaker name for generations." "But don't you think, Mrs. Whitaker," I ventured, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest, "that sometimes traditions can be evolved? To keep the family not just strong but happy?" She turned to me, her eyes like flint. "Evolving traditions, you say? What's next, abandoning them altogether? Where would we be then, I ask you?" Alex watched from the doorway, his eyes darting between his mother and me, a silent plea for peace etched into his furrowed brow. "Mother, Ella has a point. Maybe we can find a middle ground," Alex started, his voice a mix of deference and desperation. "A middle ground," Mrs. Whitaker interrupted, her gaze now fixed on her son, "is a precarious place to stand, Alexander. It often leads to a fall." I stood up, feeling the weight of her disapproval. "I respect your ways, Mrs. Whitaker," I said, my resolve hardening. "But I must also respect my own beliefs. I will not quit my job at the library. It's important to me, as are the book club meetings. The library job is one thing, she countered, her voice rising, but those meetings, nothing but a pointless congregation of gossiping women. They're more than that, I insisted. We share stories, support each other. It's a community. Mrs. Whitaker's lips thinned into a line. Community is here, with your family, not with strangers over books and tea. The room went silent, the air thick with unspoken ultimatums. Alex's plea was silent, but it hung between us, a desperate bridge over troubled waters. Fine, she spat out, the words slicing through the quiet. If you won't listen to reason, you'll learn through consequence. You leave me no choice, Ella. I hadn't realized then what she meant by consequence. I couldn't have imagined that, for my defiance, I would be met with such an archaic punishment. It was only later that day, when Alex had left for his trip and the house had quieted, that I would discover how unyielding Mrs. Whitaker could truly be. The consequence was waiting for me in the shadows of the basement, where tradition took on a darker meaning, and my spirit was to be tested against the cold embrace of solitude. The basement was a forgotten chamber, a place where discarded memories mingled with the mustiness of neglect. As the key turned in the lock, sealing my fate, I could hear the echo of Mrs. Whitaker's footsteps retreating, each step a chisel chipping away at the notion of familial warmth I had once held dear. The room was shrouded in darkness, save for the sliver of light that fought its way through a small, grime-coated window high up on the wall. The air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the false comfort above. I found myself enveloped in shadows that seemed to pulse with silent judgment. Let's see if solitude can adjust your perspective, Ella. Mrs. Whitaker's voice drifted down the stairs, a taunting specter at the doorway. I wrapped my arms around myself, seeking solace in the embrace of my own determination. You can lock me away, but you can't lock away my beliefs, I whispered to the darkness, a defiant tear tracing a cold path down my cheek. Time became an elusive creature in the blackness of the basement. Without the sun to mark its passage, minutes stretched into hours, and hours could have been days. I found a box to sit on, its contents unknown, its surface a cold reminder of my confinement. Ella? The voice was faint, a whisper through the floorboards. It was Alex, a tone of worry threading his words. Are you down there? I rose to my feet, moving toward the sound of his voice. Yes, Alex, I'm here, I called out, my voice steady. What? What happened? Why are you? His questions hung in the air, unfinished but clear in their intent. Your mother, I said, the words tasting bitter. She didn't approve of, well, me. There was silence, and in that void, I could feel the battle within him, the son versus the husband. I'll talk to her, Ella. This is madness, Alex finally said, though the conviction in his voice waned, as if diluted by the weight of his mother's authority. Don't, I replied, a surprising calm in my voice. This is something I need to face on my own. Just take care of yourself, Alex. Footsteps retreated, and once again, I was alone with the dark. The night was filled with the sound of my own heart, the quiet reassurance that it still beat strong, despite the chill of my surroundings. As hours melded into the fabric of the night, I drew upon the stories I loved from the library, imagining the voices of countless characters who had faced greater darknesses than mine. They whispered courage, spoke of resilience, and painted my thoughts with vivid tales of triumph. The darkness of the basement was absolute, but within me, there was a light that no lock could contain, a flame that grew with each remembered story of hope and defiance. This was the room where I was supposed to learn subservience, but instead, I was learning the true strength of my own spirit. The third day dawned, or so I assumed, for in the basement, dawn was just a concept. My body ached from the cold hardness of the floor where I had finally succumbed to exhaustion. I was roused by the faint sound of a car engine, which ceased abruptly, followed by the unmistakable cadence of my father's footsteps. I knew that walk, a march tempered by years of military discipline. Ella? His voice was a baritone rumble, barely audible through the thick wooden door of the basement. Dad? I called out, my voice a mixture of relief and desperation. I'm here, I'm down here. The sound of footsteps approached the basement door, and the ensuing silence was laden with tension. Mrs. Whitaker's voice sliced through the stillness. "She's down there, Richard. Learning a lesson about respect and obedience." I heard my father's reply, his tone icy with controlled anger. "Maureen, you and I have very different ideas about respect." The lock gave way with a forceful turn, and light spilled into the room, casting away the shadows. Blinking against the sudden brightness, I could just make out my father's figure framed in the doorway. He descended the steps, his eyes softening as they met mine. "Ella," he said, extending a hand, "let's get you out of here." I reached out, grasping his hand. "Dad, I'm sorry you had to." He cut me off with a shake of his head. "No child of mine apologizes for being wronged." We ascended the stairs together, emerging into the kitchen where Mrs. Whitaker stood, her face a mask of indignation. "Richard, this is family business. Ella needs to learn." My father faced her, his posture rigid with military bearing. "No, Maureen. What Ella needs is to be treated with dignity. Not to be locked away like a disobedient pet. I won't stand for it." The air was thick with the unsaid, with history and conflict, but in that moment, my father's presence was a fortress. Mrs. Whitaker's eyes flickered with something I had never seen before, doubt. "But our family—" "Family doesn't imprison family," my father interrupted firmly. "And they certainly don't break each other down. You've overstepped, and this ends now." His declaration was a gavel's fall, a decree that echoed in the silence that followed. "Richard, Mrs. Whitaker began, but faltered, the matriarch's facade crumbling. He offered me a rare smile, one that held a lifetime of unspoken affection. "Come on, Ella. Let's go home." As we left the house, I realized that for the first time I was seeing my father not just as a stern Marine, but as a protector, an ally, and a parent whose love was as unyielding as the steel he used to break my chains. The door to my old room swung open, the familiar scent of lavender and old books greeting me like an embrace. Dad had insisted I stay with him for a few days, and although I felt like a teenager returning to her childhood sanctuary, it was a refuge I found myself grateful for. "Ella, do you need anything?" Dad's voice was gentle, a contrast to the Marine's bark I grew up with. I shook my head, sinking onto the quilted bedspread. "Just some peace, I think." He nodded, the lines in his face softening. "You've got plenty of that here," he assured me before retreating, leaving the door slightly ajar. I let out a long, trembling breath, the events of the past days cascading through my mind. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence. It was Alex. "Ella, I'm so sorry. I've just landed and heard what happened. Are you okay?" His voice was fraught with worry. "I will be," I replied, the words heavy on my tongue. "We need to talk, Alex. About everything." There was a pause, and I could picture him running a hand through his hair in exasperation. I know. This has gone too far. Mom, she's out of control." "It's not just your mom," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "It's us, too. We let it get this far. We need to set some boundaries." Alex sighed, a sound of resignation and agreement. "You're right. When you're ready, we'll sit down together. With Mom, too, if you're willing." I considered his words, the seed of a new beginning taking root amidst the wreckage. "We'll see," I murmured. "Let's start with us first." The conversation with Alex was a promise, a tentative step toward a future where I was no longer a prisoner of someone else's making. As I lay back, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotations, I pondered the enormity of the change that was to come. That night, dinner with Dad was a quiet affair, the clinking of cutlery punctuating the silence. "Ella," Dad finally broke the stillness, "what will you do now?" I met his gaze, finding an unexpected kinship in his blue eyes. "I'm going to stand up for myself, Dad. And I'm going to make sure this never happens again." He nodded, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Good. Remember, you're a Thompson. We don't back down." A smile tugged at my lips. I remember. We ate in silence, but it was a comfortable one, filled with the understanding that some conversations needed no words. The aftermath of my ordeal was not just about confronting Mrs. Whitaker or redefining my marriage, it was about reclaiming my voice and my place in a family that would now have to respect my boundaries. As the evening waned and Dad retreated to his den, I was left with my thoughts and the echo of a lock snapping open. The aftermath, I realized, was not just the debris left behind by a storm, but the clarity that comes after. And in that clarity, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. The morning after my liberation was bright, the kind of luminous morning that felt like the world itself had been reborn. I sat at the kitchen table, cradling a mug of coffee as the sunlight played across the wooden surface, creating a mosaic of light and shadow. Alex had returned home late last night, his face etched with concern and disbelief as I recounted the events of the weekend. The air between us was now thick with unsaid words, a mixture of his guilt and my own shaken trust. Ella, Alex began, breaking the silence. His voice was hesitant, fragile. I'm so sorry. I never thought. Thought what, Alex? That your mother would actually imprison me? Or that you'd let her dictate our lives to this extent? My words were not angry, just tired. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation and defeat. I know. It's just, she's always been this force in my life, and I haven't? I interjected, not to wound, but to understand. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. No, it's not that. You are my life, Ella. I just don't know how to balance the two. I sighed, a long, deep breath that felt like it carried the weight of the past days with it. Alex, your mother's balance is her having control. That's not balance, that's tyranny. He nodded slowly, a dawning of realization in his eyes. You're right. I've been blind to it, and to how it's affected us. But what do we do now? She's still my mother. I reached across the table, taking his hand. We set boundaries, Alex. Real ones. And we enforce them, together. Your mother needs to understand that we are a family, too. Our own family. He squeezed my hand, a symbol of accord. Together, he echoed. We spent the rest of the morning outlining what those boundaries would look like, discussing how we would approach Mrs. Whitaker, and what our non-negotiables were. It was a conversation that should have happened long ago, but the clarity it brought felt like a heralding of a new era. The doorbell rang, an unexpected chime that interrupted our planning. Alex rose to answer it, and I heard murmured voices. Before he returned, a look of surprised contentment on his face. It's the neighbors, he said. They heard something happened and they've brought over some food. They want to make sure you're okay. I felt a surge of gratitude for the community that had quietly observed and now stepped in with such warmth. I'd like to thank them, I said, standing up. As I walked to the door, I was greeted by the sight of Mrs. Jensen from next door, holding a casserole, and Mr. Klein from across the street with a basket of muffins. Ella, dear, we just wanted to make sure you're all right, Mrs. Jensen said, her eyes reflecting a motherly concern. I smiled, feeling the genuineness of the community's support. Thank you, both of you. It means a lot to me. We look out for each other around here, Mr. Klein chimed in. And if you ever need anything, you just holler. Their kindness was a balm, and as they left, I turned to Alex. See? This is what family can be. Supportive, not suffocating. He nodded, a smile playing on his lips. A new dawn, he said softly. Yes, I agreed, feeling the weight lifting off my chest. A new dawn indeed. It was a week since the incident, and the leaves outside whispered of change. I stood by the window, watching the world go by, feeling a sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. The sunlight was a gentle touch, the breeze a quiet conversation. It was in this moment of peace that I heard the door open behind me. Ella, Alex called out, a softness in his voice that seemed to tread lightly, as if over a new ground. I turned to see him holding an envelope. The cream color of it seemed stark against his uncertain hands. "What's that?" I asked, moving towards him. "It's from my mother," he said, and his voice held a tremor of the old fear, the ingrained obedience. But there was something else there too, a note of defiance, perhaps. I took the envelope, the paper crisp and oddly formal in my hands. "Are you going to open it?" Alex asked, watching me closely. I nodded, and as I slid my finger under the seal, I felt the weight of what this letter might hold. It could be an apology, a condemnation, or another attempt at control. I unfolded the paper, and Alex and I read Mrs. Whitaker's neat script together. "Ella and Alex," it began. "I've had time to reflect on the events that transpired, and I find myself at a crossroads." I looked at Alex, his eyes scanning the lines rapidly. "She's apologizing," he murmured, disbelief etching his features. I continued reading aloud. "I understand now that my actions were out of line. I cannot undo what I've done, but I can give you the space you both deserve to make your own choices." The letter ended with an offer to sit down and discuss how we could move forward, as a family, but with respect for our autonomy. I folded the letter, feeling an unexpected surge of relief. "She's giving us a choice," I said, and there was power in that realization, the power to choose how and when to engage. Alex nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's what you've always said, isn't it? That we have the choice. We're not under her command." I smiled back, and it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. "Yes, and we choose to be kind, but also to be firm. We decide what our family looks like." "So, what do we do?" Alex asked, the old hesitance now a shadow of what it once was. "We accept her offer," I replied, "but on our terms. We meet in a neutral place, we express our feelings, and we listen. We build something new, something healthier." He took my hand, his grip strong and sure. "Together," he affirmed, and I felt the strength that came from that unity. "Together," I echoed, feeling the truth of it deep in my bones. The decision was made. We would meet with Mrs. Whitaker, but the dynamics had irrevocably shifted. The power of choice was ours, and with it, the future opened up like the sky at dawn, vast, bright, and infinite in its possibilities. In the tapestry of tranquil streets that was our suburb, each home was a thread interwoven with the next, creating a community quilt of serenity and sameness. Here, I found my slice of the American dream, a quaint two-story home with Jamie, my partner in all things life. The backdrop of our existence was a chorus of lawnmowers and the occasional laughter of children playing until the streetlights flickered on. Jamie and I had settled into this routine, our lives a comfortable pattern of work, weekend barbecues, and the yearly block party. We were the typical couple next door, our biggest adventure being the selection of annuals for the flower beds. It was on one such uneventful day that I sat on the porch, a mug of coffee warming my hands, as Marlene, my mother-in-law, strutted up the walkway. Her arrival was always announced by the jangle of her bangles and the swish of her colorful maxi dress. "Morning, Ava," Marlene chirped, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife through butter. "Good morning, Marlene," I greeted her, forcing a smile. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" She settled herself on the swing beside me, her perfume a heady cloud. "Can't a mother visit her son and his lovely wife without an agenda?" she quipped, though her eyes danced with an all-too-familiar mischief. I chuckled, a sound more polite than genuine. "Of course, you're always welcome," I replied. But Marlene's visits were never just social calls, they were scouting missions for gossip or, as I would soon find out, much more. It was during one of these visits that Marlene first laid eyes on the car, the sleek embodiment of Jamie's and my years of scrimping and saving. Her gaze lingered on the shiny curves of the vehicle, a shadow crossing her usually expressive face. $100,000 on 4 wheels. "Must be nice," she said, a note of something I couldn't place in her voice. "It's not just a car, Marlene. It's a dream Jamie and I have had since college," I explained, my own pride swelling as I spoke of our achievement. Marlene hummed, her eyes still fixed on the car. Dreams. I had a lot of those once. Her words hung between us, laden with a history of unspoken disappointments. I reached out, touching her arm gently. We're grateful for every bit of it, Marlene. We worked hard for this. She snapped out of her reverie, offering me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course, dear. Hard work should be rewarded, she said, rising from the swing. I'll let you get on with your day. Don't want to keep you from enjoying your reward. As she walked away, the unease settled in the pit of my stomach. There was something in the way she said reward, a bitterness that was uncharacteristic even for her. I watched her leave, the clinking of her bangles fading into the distance, unaware that this was the quiet before the storm, the prelude to an act of rebellion against a lifetime of what she perceived to be injustices. Little did I know, our peaceful suburb was about to become the stage for an unprecedented drama. Marlene was like a storm cloud in a clear sky, her arrival often heralded by a flurry of activity and a palpable tension. She had a laugh that could fill a room and opinions that could clear one just as quickly. Her eccentricities were well known, her demeanor as flamboyant as the peacock feathers she fancied wearing in her hats. The day Jamie and I brought home our new sports car, a sleek machine that gleamed like a sapphire in the sun, Marlene's eyes had sparkled, but not with joy. She ran her fingers along the hood, her touch almost possessive. Ava, darling, isn't this a bit much? She had asked, a slight curl to her lip that wasn't quite a smile. It's rather ostentatious, don't you think? Jamie had jumped to my defense, his arm finding its way protectively around my shoulders. Mom, this is Ava's dream. She's worked hard for it. I had tried to keep the peace, offering a placating smile. It's not just about the car, Marlene. It's about what it represents. Years of saving, of dreaming. It's achievement. But her response was a scoff, a sound that seemed to echo off the driveway. Achievement? If you say so, dear. I just hope it doesn't get scratched. You know how these suburbs can be. Not everything that shines stays that way. Her words had hung in the air, heavy with something I couldn't quite place. Was it warning? Jealousy? I had pushed the thought away, not wanting to believe that envy could tarnish our relationship. As days passed, I noticed Marlene's visits became more frequent, her comments more pointed. Jamie, ever the optimist, brushed it off as his mother being her usual self, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It wasn't until the day our car disappeared that the true depth of Marlene's envy became painfully clear. The emptiness in the driveway was a gaping hole, the absence of our dream a physical weight. When Marlene called, her voice was a siren's call, luring me into the storm of betrayal that had been brewing beneath her feigned affection. Ava, how careless to leave such a pricey toy out for anyone to take, she had said, her words dripping with a vindictive pleasure that made my blood run cold. The realization hit hard, the knowledge that Marlene's envy had driven her to commit the unthinkable. The sports car wasn't just a vehicle, it was the embodiment of our achievements, and she had stolen it as if to say that our dreams were nothing but playthings for her whims. The envy of a mother-in-law had shattered the quiet suburb, the ripple effects of her actions spreading out to touch every corner of our once peaceful lives. The morning sun had yet to chase away the shadows of dawn when I stepped onto the driveway, a routine farewell on my lips, ready to wish Jamie off to work. But where there should have been the proud silhouette of our sapphire sports car, there was nothing. An inexplicable void greeted me, a gaping maw where our beloved car had been. A chill crept up my spine, the early morning air suddenly heavy, laden with a sense of foreboding. My hands, trembling as if caught in a winter gale, fumbled with my phone. I punched in the numbers to the local police with a growing sense of dread. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was a lifeline in the thickening fog of my panic. Our car, it's been stolen, I managed to stammer out, the words tasting of disbelief. It was there last night, and now, it's just gone. I could hear the scratching of a pen, the mundane sound a stark contrast to the chaos brewing within me. Ma'am, please stay on the line. We'll send an officer to your location immediately. Can you give me a description of the vehicle? As I recounted the details, the reality of the situation sank in. My dream, our dream, had been unceremoniously snatched away in the cover of night. The connection to the dispatcher was a thin thread, a tenuous hold-on composure that threatened to snap with each passing second. The phone buzzed with a call-waiting tone, and a glance at the screen showed Marlene's number. "Hold on, there's another call coming in." "It might be important," I told the dispatcher. I switched lines, a part of me naively hoping for a simple explanation, a mistake perhaps. "Marlene?" I inquired, my voice a mixture of hope and rising anxiety. "Hello, Ava," Marlene's voice oozed through the speaker, syrupy and cool. "I guess you can say goodbye to your $100,000 car." Her words were a sledgehammer, shattering the fragile hope that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding. "What did you do, Marlene?" I demanded, my voice sharp, the edges of fear giving way to anger. There was a pause, a hesitation that was unlike her. Then, with a theatrical sigh, she continued, "Oh, Ava, you always did care too much about material things. It's just a car." "Just a car?" I echoed, incredulity lacing my tone. "Marlene, that car was more than just steel and paint. It was a symbol of our hard work. You know that. Why would you take it? Where is it?" A chuckle, cold and mirthless, was her only reply. "All I can say is, things have a way of disappearing around here. You should be more careful with your possessions." I switched back to the dispatcher, my heart racing. "I need to report a theft, and I think I know who took it." My voice was a mix of resolve and a growing thirst for justice. "My mother-in-law just admitted to taking our car." The officers arrived with the efficiency and professionalism that the suburbs rarely needed but were grateful to have. They listened as I recounted the call, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and disbelief. As they took notes, Jamie paced behind me, his usual calm demeanor shattered like the peace of our once quiet morning. "I can't believe this, my own mother," he muttered, his words punctuated by a helplessness that echoed my own. In the hours that followed, the absence of our car became more than a physical loss. It was the disappearance of trust, of family bonds, and of the belief that some lines could never be crossed. The quiet suburb had awakened not to the song of birds but to the discordant melody of betrayal. I stood in the sterile glow of the police station, the hum of fluorescent lights mixing with the muffled voices of duty and distress. My hands were cold, clasped together to stop them from shaking, as I waited for the detective to return. The walls bore witness to countless stories of woe, and now they would absorb mine. Detective Martinez returned, a folder thick with the scent of fresh ink and bad news in his hands. "We found her," he announced without preamble, his voice betraying no emotion. "Found who?" I feigned ignorance, though my heart raced with the knowledge of who he meant. "Your mother-in-law, Mrs. Thompson," he said as he opened the folder and laid out photographs taken just hours ago. There she was, MIL, sitting at a diner with a cup of coffee, and a stack of bills so high it would make a banker blink. How could she? The words escaped my lips, a whisper lost in the buzzing of the station. Detective Martinez offered a look of sympathy that didn't quite reach his eyes. "She's at the precinct now. Sold your car to a local dealership. They had no idea it was stolen." I shook my head, trying to comprehend. "But why?" "That's what we're going to find out," he replied, standing up. "You can come with me if you want to be there for the questioning." I nodded, rising to follow him, my legs stiff as if they too protested this reality. The precinct's interrogation room was colder than the rest of the building, a small box of a space with a table that seemed to hold the weight of the world. MIL sat there, cuffed, her face a mask of something I couldn't quite discern. Was it regret? Fear? It was hard to tell with the woman who had, until today, been an enigma wrapped in suburban banality. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice steady though it threatened to break. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for a moment, I saw something akin to sorrow. I just wanted to know what it felt like," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "To feel what?" I pressed, needing to understand. To feel like you, successful, admired, looked up to. Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, her posture deflated. The detective interjected, "You realize you've committed a serious crime, Mrs. Thompson?" Emil's gaze returned to me, pleading. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was just a moment of madness." I leaned forward, the anger and betrayal coalescing into a cold resolve. "And now, because of that moment, you're going to face the consequences." Emil's eyes filled with tears, but they did nothing to quell the fire of my resolve. "Please," she begged, "I know I've wronged you, but I'm still your family." I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor like a gavel, sentencing her. "You can say hello to a $1 million lawsuit," I declared, the words sealing her fate as much as they shattered the last vestige of our familial bond. The room was silent, save for the sound of Emil's quiet sobs and the detective's pen scratching across his notepad. The reckoning had come, not with the fury of a storm, but with the cold finality of a door closing, never to be opened again. The courtroom was a stark arena, a stage set for the drama of justice, where the truth would be stripped bare, for all to see. It was the day of reckoning for Marlene, my mother-in-law, once a figure of whimsical chaos, now the defendant in a suit too somber for her vibrant personality. I sat rigid on the hard wooden bench, a plaintiff poised between the twin pillars of anxiety and determination. My attorney, Mr. Hughes, patted my hand reassuringly as we awaited the judge's entrance. "Remember, Ava, just stick to the facts. Let her actions speak for themselves," he murmured. I nodded, though my stomach twisted into knots. The facts were cold, hard things, but the emotions they stirred within me were anything but. The bailiff's voice cut through the murmurs of the gallery. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Andrews." We stood in unison, a wave of formality washing over the room as the judge took her seat. "Please be seated. Let's proceed with the case of Thompson versus Thompson." The air was thick with anticipation as Mr. Hughes presented our case. Exhibit A, the callous phone call. Exhibit B, the CCTV footage. Exhibit C, Marlene's bank records showing a cascade of debts. Marlene's attorney, a young man with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, tried to paint a picture of desperation, of a woman pushed to the brink by society's unforgiving nature. But it was Marlene's turn on the stand that everyone awaited, a moment of human frailty amid the legal posturing. "Mrs. Thompson, can you explain these gambling debts?" Mr. Hughes asked, his voice echoing in the hushed courtroom. Marlene wrung her hands, her gaze flickering to mine before settling on the wooden grain of the witness stand. "I was trying to win it all back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The money I lost, the time. I thought if I could just get one big win, I could make everything right again." "And you thought selling Ava's car would solve your problems?" Mr. Hughes pressed on. "I didn't. I wasn't thinking." "It was a mistake," Marlene faltered, the mask of defiance crumbling. From the gallery, a soft sob broke the silence. It was Jamie, torn between his roles as a supportive spouse and a betrayed son. "Marlene," I found myself speaking, not as the wronged daughter-in-law, but as a woman seeing another's world unravel. "Why didn't you come to us for help?" Her eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the raw pain of pride and regret. "Because I couldn't bear it," she confessed. "You had everything together, and I was falling apart." The truth was a dam breaking, the waters of hidden grief and shame flooding the courtroom. Marlene had been drowning, not in the physical sense, but in a sea of her own making, her pride a leaden weight. The judge's gavel brought us back to the present, to the legalities that would dictate Marlene's future. Given the evidence presented, this court has no choice but to rule in favor of the plaintiff, Judge Andrews declared, her voice the final note in the symphony of justice. The gallery exhaled, a collective release of tension, as Marlene was led away, her fate sealed by her own hand. The unveiling had been more than just the exposure of a crime, it had laid bare the human heart, with all its complexities and contradictions. And as I left the courtroom, the weight of the day heavy upon my shoulders, I knew that the story of Marlene, of our family, would be a cautionary tale, a reminder of how easily the fabric of our lives could unravel. The dust had settled, and the courtroom drama that had riveted our small town had finally drawn to a close. Marlene's sentence was handed down, and with it, the expectation that life would return to normal. But normalcy had shifted, and in its place was a new reality that seemed alien to the quiet suburbia I once knew. I found myself sitting on the porch, the cool evening breeze carrying whispers of the day's events. Jamie sat beside me, his presence a silent pillar of strength amidst the turmoil. "Ava," he began, his voice a low hum in the quiet of the twilight, "I'm so sorry. For everything she put you through. I placed a hand over his, squeezing it gently. "Jamie, you have nothing to apologize for. We were both blindsided by this." He shook his head, his gaze lost to the horizon. "But it was my mother, my family. It's hard not to feel responsible in some way." I sighed, the weight of the entire ordeal pressing against my chest. "Family doesn't come with a manual, love. We just do the best we can with what we have." We sat in silence, each lost in our reflections until the whispering leaves seemed to urge us to speak our truths. "I keep thinking about the last thing she said in court," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I just wanted to feel like I mattered." "That's what she said." "It's been echoing in my mind ever since." Jamie's grip tightened. "I know. It's been echoing in mine, too. She lost her way, Ava. She got caught up in wanting more and forgot what she already had." The moon hung above, a silent witness to our confessions. It cast a silver glow, painting our world in shades of gray where once I only saw black and white. "You know, the strangest thing is," Jamie continued, "I always thought our lives were too mundane for her taste. But maybe it was the stability she craved after all." "That's just it, isn't it?" I mused. "We strive for excitement, for something extraordinary, but when life throws us these curveballs, we realize the value of the ordinary days we took for granted." A dog barked in the distance, a comforting sound that spoke of normal life outside our bubble of sorrow. "I think I've learned something from all this," I said, turning to face Jamie. "I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, nor does it excuse the hurt caused. But it's a step towards healing, for both of us." Jamie nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Yeah. And I've learned that even though we can't choose our family, we can choose how we let their actions affect us. We can choose to move forward, even when it feels like we're stuck in the past." The night wrapped around us, a cloak of solace as we contemplated the future. There was much to rebuild, trust to be mended, and wounds to be healed. But in this moment of quiet reflection, there was also hope. Hope that with time, the echoes of the past would fade into whispers, and our lives would find a new rhythm, perhaps not as innocent as before, but wiser and more resilient. "We'll get through this, Ava." "Together," Jamie said, his voice firm with resolve. I leaned into him, finding comfort in his certainty. "Together," I echoed. The reflection had brought pain, but in its wake, it also promised the possibility of growth. As the stars twinkled above, like distant beacons of light, I knew that the story of the stolen car would always be a part of us, but it wouldn't define us. We were more than a single chapter of chaos, we were a narrative still being written, each day a fresh page to start anew.